It's 2 p.m. Every good afternoon and welcome to Market View this afternoon. It's the Tuesday edition. My name is Lungilele Makakula. Thank you for tuning in. You can watch us on our YouTube page, Eswatini TV. Good afternoon and welcome. The Eswatini Public Procurement Regulatory Agency is working to ensure that government has one procurement system to ensure efficiency through a study that it will conduct. Business journalist Nelsiwe Ndlangamala had a detailed interview with Thandeka Dube, who is the project coordinator at ESPPRA. Stay tuned for this interview later in the program. For our leading story today, EU ambassador says the European Union will heavily invest on market-driven capital development and technical vocational education and training for the youth, focusing mainly on green skills. Then later, Sanele Sibiya will connect with us for today's stock markets. It seems European stocks are higher today, and the Federal Reserve is expected to begin an easing cycle that could see policymakers deliver a rate cut. Do stay tuned for today's program. For now, let's head straight to business news. And for our first story, the European Union will heavily invest on market-driven capital development and technical vocational education and training for the youth, focusing mainly on green skills. This was said by the EU Ambassador Kirsten during the 3rd European Union Green Power Transformation Forum at the Happy Valley Hotel at Eswatini. The event was organized by Business Eswatini, Get Invest and Get Transform.
The climate and biodiversity crisis are a reality for our planet. They are a joint challenge and a true crisis of our times. Even countries that have not contributed to the problem have to join and contribute to the solution. Today, the 27 member states of the European Union collectively contribute to less than 8% of global CO2 emissions. If you consider that this share was 15% at the beginning of the millennium, the effort and the commitment of the EU on this matter is evident. Nevertheless, we do not want to stop here. The EU is committed to spearheading the global fight against climate change. EU leaders aspire to make Europe the first economy worldwide to become climate neutral, an economy with net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This objective is at the heart of the so-called European Green Deal, which is the label for what has been the policy priorities and also a package of legislative measures launched by the previous European Commission 5 years ago, and I'm sure this will be one of the priorities for the next European Commission that is about to take their place in the coming months. Last year, Dubai hosted the United Nations COP28 Climate Summit. During the summit, the world's first Climate Loss and Damage Fund for climate emergencies was launched, with over 400 million euros in funding from the EU and its member states contributing to it. The EU invites all parties in a position to do so to contribute to the fund and relevant financial arrangements. We acknowledge that those most vulnerable and with the least capacity to deal with adverse effects of climate change already bear the costs. Therefore, the sources of funding need to be as wide and deep as possible. The EU wants to see a fund that is up and running as soon as possible and it meets the demands of the most vulnerable. Let me also highlight the joint Global Pledge initiative facilitated by both the COP28 presidency and the European Union to triple renewable energy capacities and double energy efficiency improvements before the end of the decade, and to work towards a negotiated outcome that reflects those global targets. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU is recognized as a world leader in promoting international responses to environment and climate challenges. And we're here today because we know that we are among like-minded friends. We believe that it is our collective duty to make the green power transition in Eswatini a process that contributes to the energy security and sovereignty of the country, while also delivering on a sustainable and inclusive economic growth, as well as better jobs, especially for the young generation.
The Eswatini Public Procurement Regulatory Agency is working to ensure that government has one procurement system to ensure efficiency through a study that it will conduct.
By pooling our resources, knowledge, and expertise, we can overcome the barriers and accelerate the development of renewable energy solutions. I urge each one of you to seek opportunities for collaboration with fellow participants during this forum. Let us leverage our collective strengths to create more sustainable, resilient energy system for Eswatini. Secondly, innovation is the lifeblood of progress, powering advancement in renewable energy, accelerating the transition to a sustainable future, and helping us tackle the pressing challenges such as self-reliance and climate change, amongst others. The renewable energy landscape is rapidly evolving, presenting us with unprecedented opportunities to harness advanced technologies and innovative solutions. As we explore the latest trends in renewable energy, let us remain open-minded and forward-thinking. Embracing innovation will not only enhance our energy efficiency, but also create new economic opportunities and jobs for our communities. Finally, inclusivity must be at the forefront of our efforts. The transition to renewable energy must benefit all segments of society, ensuring that marginalized and vulnerable communities are not left behind. As we develop policies and programs, let us prioritize inclusivity and equity. By empowering communities with access to clean energy solutions, we can foster sustainable development and improve the quality of life of all citizens. It's our collective responsibility to ensure that the benefits of renewable energy are shared equitably across our society. In conclusion, I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Business Eswatini, the European Union delegation, GIZ, Get Invest, and Get Transform for your resolute support and dedication to advancing the renewable energy agenda in Eswatini. Your commitment to fostering collaboration and capacity building is instrumental to our progress. As we embark on this forum, let us remember that our journey towards a sustainable energy future is not an individual endeavor. It's a collective mission that requires our concerted efforts and commitments. Together, we can transform our energy landscape, unlock new opportunities, and create a brighter, greener future for Eswatini.
Apologies for the mix-up. The story we just played was for the Minister of Finance, Honorable Neil Rackenberg, who said collaboration across all sectors is key in the country reaching a stage of self-sufficient renewable energy. The Minister was speaking during the EU Green Power Transformation Forum at Eswatini. More efforts are being put into ensuring access to finance for small and medium enterprises in the country. This has been said by the Director of Small and Medium Enterprises, Mluleki Dlamini, stating that these efforts are meant to support government's policy statement, which looks to support economic growth, which looks to for economic development in 22 key performance areas.
The policy statement speaks to the development of micro, small and medium enterprises, particularly on the issue of creating confidence using policies that will support the micro, small and medium enterprises, and also issues that speaks to growth of the sector, because we really need to assist the sector financially and also in terms of business support. So basically, this is what it is in the policy for micro, small and medium enterprises. And lastly, the issue of competitiveness. We really need to make sure that our businesses are competitive in terms of their production capacity, and also issues of standards, because we really need to want to see our products in the domestic market and also going further into the export market. So basically, those are the focus areas that we really need to look into as a department, and also in pursuit of the statement by His Excellency. We'll be doing quite a number of things, such as the ease of doing business. You can see recently that businesses can be registered in just a day. So those are the initiatives that the ministry has done, and also as a department will then focus also on the issues of capacitating businesses in terms of business plan with SETCO, on board and other agencies that will be working with us. So in that way, we are also bringing financial institutions on board, like as was in the past. But this time around, we just want to say how best can we cover that gap in terms of financial access, and then also what are the products that they are going to develop for businesses. I'm happy to report that the Citizen Economic Empowerment Council is meeting this week. So they will be sitting down to strategize in terms of how also this policy statement can be implemented in view of their mandate as per the Act which establishes them.
It's 11 minutes after 2, and that's it for our business news. After the break, Nelly sits down with Thandeka Dube, who's the project coordinator at ESPPRA.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Ujala masoda amahle kunathi lesa.
Sabadala ukuthi njengalokhu
Sivile sive sikhulume.
Welcome back. You're still watching Market View. This is the Tuesday edition. Thank you for tuning in. The Eswatini Public Procurement Regulatory Agency is working to ensure that government has one procurement system to ensure efficiency. The project coordinator for the methodology for assessing procurement systems, MAPS, Thandeka Dube, says the agency will use the findings of the study to shape the future of procurement in the country.
Thandeka, welcome to the show. Please tell us about the methodology for assessing procurement systems. What is it?
The MAPS is basically a methodology for assessing procurement system. It's a universal reform tool to try and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the procurement system at the country level. So it's this project was basically funded by the African Development Bank, which the SPPRA received a grant in 2023, which then marked the commencement of the implementation of the project. So basically today was just a dissemination workshop of the final report after we have concluded maybe the data collection process and validation. In which we gathered information or procurement cases from different procuring entities, whereby we sampled procurement records and we tried and reviewed those documents to try and gather how the procurement process is being considered or being facilitated in those procuring entities. And then at this point, I think around February, we did a data validation session whereby we had to validate the findings of the first draft report to try and gather whether the findings were what was exactly happening in the country. So the validation workshop was conducted in February 2024, which is earlier this year. And then after that, we then tried to incorporate some of the stakeholders' input to try and improve the report. That is why today we are now maybe disseminating the final report.
Before we get to the findings of the report, I want you to tell us about the reasons behind such a study.
All right. So this project was initiated by the country's, quest to try and reform the public procurement space. Specifically because as a country, we need to be accountable for the use of public funds. That's the first starting point. So in order to be accountable, as early as 2008, there was an introduction of the procurement standards. that we're trying to provide guidelines on how the procurement should be facilitated among procuring entities. And then since then, we have also introduced the regulations of 2020, which also were a stepping stone in terms of the implementation of the reforms. So basically, that was the reason why this project was initiated, to try and ensure that we improve the procurement system and also hold people accountable for the use of public funds.
What were the prevalent challenges that you came across as an agency before this study was conducted?
Okay. As the executing agency, the challenges that we encountered was mainly on the lack of supporting documentation to support the procurement activities that have been conducted within the procuring entities. So one of the key maybe challenges was the poor records management within the procuring entities, because there was no evidence to support whatsoever procurements had been conducted at the time. And then the lack of documentation then resulted in us not having maybe enough, I would say, enough evidence, even though we were able to acquire almost above 60% of the records. But the target was to maybe get the 100% supporting document from the procuring entities, which was not possible due to the poor record keeping and document management.
Talk to us now about the findings. I think it would be very interesting to know what is it that the African Development Bank study has found out, especially because we know when it comes to ESPPRA, I think the prevalent outcry is that of maybe tenders and them being not transparent at sometimes. I know that we've had different conversations where even the CEO has mentioned that you have worked so hard to overcome that challenge.
One of the key highlights was that we currently have two parallel systems that are running in terms of facilitating the procurement system. One which is within central government and one which is within local and category A parastatals. So the assessment team had actually identified that as a challenge, because we need to have one line of communication or one procurement system that would be able to ensure a operational efficiency. And also, one of the other issues that we identified was the lack of suitably qualified procurement professionals in procuring entities. So the persons that are currently responsible for carrying out the procurement function are not well qualified to conduct or facilitate any procurement activities. So that is why it even becomes difficult to then hold them accountable, because they do not understand maybe even the ethics of their function or even the codes of the function. So I think as an agency, the way forward is highlighted was to try and maybe work around the professionalization of the public procurement spends together with the responsible ministries and stakeholders.
As you are trying to work around the challenges that you have mentioned, kusaqhutshekwa kusasetshenzwa, kutawendekani yini le nitawuyenta kucinisekisa ukuthi timali tahulumende phela atichubeki nekulahleka loku nisalungisa lapha nalapha?
Okay. Currently, we are in the process of conducting a project, we'll say, as an agency that is also trying to assist the procuring entities to identify the institutional gaps and provide them recommendations, which is the workload and capacity assessment. So in the meanwhile, we are conducting those assessments and trying to provide recommendations to procuring entities. At the same time, we will be conducting audits, whilst we also emphasize on the compliance issues, because we are in constant interaction with the procuring entities and reminding them that they need to comply. If they do not comply, then there will be maybe certain sanctions that will be implemented.
The findings and results of this study, do they address the challenge mhlambe maswati lamaningi lakhala ngawo ikakhulu lawa lasebhizinisini lokwekuthi kulesinye isikhathi uyakhanza ukuthi lamathenda mhlawumbe beva ngathi awasiwo mhlawumbe la transparent nale ndlela mhlawumbe lokukhethwa ngayo labo lokufanele ukuthi mhlawumbe basupply uhulumende noma basebende emisebenzini lemikhulu ayihambi kahle. How much will the study, what role will the study play, the findings I mean, to address that outcry?
The MAPS study or recommendations, first and foremost, is that we need to capacitate or sensitize both the public and the private stakeholders, including the civil society organizations. So what has been happening so far was that we recently had an engagement with the private sector where we tried to explain the legal and regulatory framework so that they are able to understand what is happening within the public procurement space. If they're able to understand that, then they can be able to follow the necessary procedures or process to voice out their concerns. So we recently conducted a capacity building initiative which focused on business people or businesses, where we did not only explain the legal and regulatory framework for Eswatini, but also on how they can tap into opportunities within the World Bank, which is one of the development partners that is currently maybe implementing large projects within the country. So that was also highlighted in the project.
Thandeka, it's been a pleasure. We have worked with ESPPRA on this show for a long time, and we have seen the strides that the agency has taken into ensuring that the procurement space remains transparent at all times. We are hoping that you are going to implement the findings of this study to continue making the space of procurement the best in the country.
That is Thandeka Dube, project coordinator at ESPPRA. She says the agency is working on ensuring that government has one procurement system. After the break, we connect with Sandy Lesvia for today's financial markets. Welcome back. It's 23 minutes after 2. You're still tuned in to Market View, the Tuesday edition. Thank you for staying with us. We connect with Sandilet Biya, in-house economist for today's financial markets. Mrs. Biya, a very good afternoon. How are you this afternoon? Thank you for joining us. What's happening in international markets today? Let's start off with the U.S. markets today.
Good afternoon, Lou, and thank you for having me. So when we are looking at markets, what we are seeing is just a mixed picture across the board. If we look into the US, you will see that the Nasdaq actually closed a bit down yesterday, while with the Dow Jones International Average and with the S&P 500, we can see that those ones closed on a bit of a positive note. So that's actually on the background of what you see in terms of the tech sector. We've seen major tech stocks like your Apple, you really just trading behind, showing signs that they are not performing as they did in the previous year. So that's why we're seeing the Nasdaq Composite Index really at that level. And in terms of the overall caution and optimism that we are seeing in the market is the fact that we know that today the Federal Reserve meeting will actually start today, and tomorrow with a decision in terms of the rates. So what the markets are now trying to weigh in is whether we are going to go for a 25 basis point cut or a 50% basis point cut. So that's what markets are trying to weigh in now, because the rate decision itself will also be signaling whether the markets are really in distress or it's just a basic normalization drive. So that's what we are waiting for. A 50% basis, a 50 percentage point basis cut would actually somehow signal that there's a lot of distress in the market. So that's what markets are looking for. So if we move into the European markets, you will see that the picture is generally a jovial one. That's because we are just waiting for data to come out in terms of inflation data to come out in the UK more especially, and there's also that issue where we're waiting for markets to see how we are waiting to see how the Bank of England will play around with their rates, and also waiting to see how the Federal Reserve Bank will play with their rates. So as inflation data comes out this week, it will signal whether the Bank of England will be cutting rates towards the end of the week. But what we are seeing here, Lou, is the fact that markets remain relatively optimistic, even though the changes are marginal, but we still are in positive territory, signaling that there's a bit of some investor confidence that's still there in those markets. Moving into Asia, again, what we are seeing is that type of mixed picture with Hong Kong really just pulling ahead on the positive, while mainland China and Japan remain on the negative. For what we are waiting to see there is we are waiting to see how the rates decision in the US will play out. And what we are seeing right now is, with the strengthening of the dollar, we see that the Japanese yen are beginning to weaken a bit again. So no markets are taking that into stride again, because we had just thought recently that the Japanese yen had somehow stabilized in a new equilibrium region. But with the whole talk around the interest rates are cut in the US, there is a bit of strength that's being pumped into the dollar, and the yen is not responding well to that. So markets are waiting to see how that shift is going to happen. And then within mainland China, the economic troubles still remain there, but mostly we are also waiting to see if changes in the interest rates in the US are actually going to bode well for the Chinese markets. And then coming down into South Africa, we can see that the South African markets are jovial of the lower interest rates that have been recorded in the month of August, of our inflation rate that has been recorded in the month of August, and we are now just awaiting a decision come Thursday. I think on Thursday we are awaiting a decision from the Federal Reserve Bank of South Africa to really just or from the Reserve Bank of South Africa to make an announcement in terms of the interest rate decision, and we are hoping for a cut. Just an issue of the magnitude, but we will expect a minimum of a 25 basis point cut, probably to another 50%, another 50 basis point cut. I think that would be within the visible space. So the markets are eating that up, but waiting cautiously to see how the US is going to fare. And then when you come into the domestic market, you can see that Eswatini Stock Exchange has actually still stays on that 491.97, that marginal loss that we saw, I think, last week or Thursday before we closed the show. So we are still at that level. And then I think if we move into commodities, you'll see that commodities as well are telling of the story, Lou, the story of the interest rates and the demand deficiencies that exist in the market. So we can see that encapsulated in the numbers in terms of our commodities trade. When you look at gold, you can see that gold is starting its downward trajectory now below the 5,000 mark, purely because we are waiting to see how much of the interest rate cut is actually going to result in portfolio realignment moving towards your equities. And then when you look at the price of Brent crude, it's still at very low levels, still signaling the fact that there is some forecast demand deficiency in the markets. And we are hoping that the interest rate decision will somehow spur or revive or breathe some life into the economy, so we can see economic activity coming back into life again. And then in terms of our currency, as we are waiting that rate cut to come through from the US, what we are seeing right now is, there's a bit of strength that is coming in from the major currencies. We can see that our currencies actually relatively lost ground across all currencies today. We've made some marginal losses, but one thing that remains is the fact that we are making those marginal losses within a very strong region. I think that's the most comforting picture. But as we get more clearer news in terms of the interest rate coming out tomorrow in the US, then we shall start seeing some movements within the exchange rate that might be very much a market if depending on what we are going to be doing in terms of the interest rates domestically.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lou.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Spear, for that analysis for today's financial markets. And that's it for our program today. This was the Tuesday edition of Market View. Thank you for tuning in. If you've just opened this channel, worry not, you can still watch Market View on our YouTube page, Eswatini TV. We'll see you tomorrow for Business Watch.